Hello and welcome back to Wisdom in Action, the podcast where we explore what it takes to bridge the gap between knowing and doing, because that's where the real wisdom is born. I'm Oscar Potninja, Brazilian's coach and podcast strategist, and I created this space to have honest conversations with real experts and bring you practical insights you can apply, not just think about. Today, we're joined by Kelly Meyer, an international transformational coach, speaker, and author. He's guiding deep change through one-on-one coaching, group facilitation, workshops, and stages for nearly 30 years. Kelly, welcome to Wisdom in Action.
Well, thank you, Ostra. I'm grateful to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So to start us off, what is one piece of wisdom that changed everything once you applied it?
There's a story actually that goes with this, and I was young. I was maybe 14 years old, and I began spending a lot of time in a place that I probably shouldn't have been. My argument was that school was really boring, and I would much rather be playing pool. So I skipped a lot of school to go down to the pool hall. There was one morning who stands out in particular to me because I walked into the pool hall in the morning and I noticed an old man getting off of his bar stool at the far end of the bar and walking towards the front door. And as we met, he stopped dead in front of me and he said, "Who are you?" Now, I'd never seen this guy before. And I said, "Well, I'm Kelly." And he looked at me for what seemed forever. And then he said, "No, you're not. And the sooner you figure that out, the better off you'll be." And he walked out the bar. And I was thinking, like, here I am, I'm like a scrawny little pimply faced junior high punk. And I thought, what a weirdo, crazy old drunk guy hassling some little kid. And, shortly after that, though, I went through an awkward teenage phase. It was the phase of discovery where we try to figure out, who we are and what we represent. We all go through that. And when I hit that phase and I was feeling lost, it was actually that crazy old drunk man's words that came back to me. The sooner you figure it out, the better off you'll be. And so I made a conscious decision. This is who I am. This is what I'm going to represent. And I was able to move on with my life. See, it turns out that as humans, we always evolve, we always change, we always grow. And so we need to constantly take a look at who we are and what we represent. I'm going to be 56 pretty soon, and I still hear the old man's words. I still go through that process of reinventing. So I think that's the first big one to, lead off with is that the sooner you figure it out, the better off you'll be. And I attribute those to that crazy old drunk man in the bar on when I was supposed to be in school.
It's interesting how the smallest coincidences or smallest encounters can have such a big impact on our experiences or even like the how we end up living our lives. So with that, like finding out who you are, what you stand for, how to do that, where do you start?
Well, uh, that's a hard question. Who are you? That's a hard one for us to answer. And through my years of experience in working with other people is that I've discovered that an easier question to answer is who are you not?
uh,
So if we can begin to eliminate all of those people who don't lift us up, who don't make us a better person, if we can stop going to those places that don't make us a better person. Now, I know that the drinks are fun. I know that the food is great, but we feel like crap the next day, right? So it's not really the best place for us. But if we can start eliminating those slowly from our life, we have no choice but to end up spending time with who we really are. Early on in my life, when I was a young teenager, I just made a blind decision. This is who I'm going to be. And did it work out? Was I right? No. But at least I had a course of direction and I could alter course as I went. And the same is true as adults. We're not going to be right every time. But as long as we make a decision, then we can start moving. Then we can start putting one foot in front of the other. And we can correct course as we go. That's fine.
Correcting the course as we go. I want to talk on that because I think a lot of times there's few things that I have seen. One is we start going on the course and then we just stick with it just because we decided that's the course, even if we might have some signs that we need to pivot. But the other one is that I see a lot of times we have regrets about making a decision even before you have made it. That let's say you're in front of like two choices, you already have regrets about one of them even before you have made any decision. How to navigate it?
Um, I think that the term regret is mindset, um, how we perceive what could happen. And that's really ego talking. Like it's going to find what's wrong, what could go wrong. And some things are just plain scary. That's just the honest truth. But if we see them as opportunities rather than regret, like, I'm not sure if I did this because, so I choose A over B because if I choose A, I'm going to hurt this person. If I choose B, I'm going to lose this chance. I don't know if that's going to work out anyway. So I don't know which way to do. Maybe I just do A, and I hate making the choice of A, but I have to make a choice, right? So that's the kind of regret that if we can see opportunity as opposed to what we might lose, think of what we might gain and focus on that, because you'll always find what you focus on. And not only will you find it, but you'll find it in abundance. So
Uh,
focus on what you could gain from it as opposed to what you might lose.
with the mindset, like what do you think, and you have quite long experience working with people, what are some of the things that you have seen people get wrong about the mindset?
They give themselves permission to fail. That's a big thing because so many people talk about failures and their failures in their life. They're not failures unless you allow them to be failures because they're really lessons. And if you can see those as lessons, that's just part of mindset is seeing the positive as opposed to the negative. Um, there's a study that I do or an experiment I do with crowds when I do keynote speeches and workshops is that I will draw a little black circle in the bottom corner of a piece of paper and then I'll hold it up to the audience and say, define what you see. I mean, describe it. And they will all describe the black circle. And I go through this process with them and I say, you know what, that's right. You know, you described the black circle perfectly, but nobody ever describes the white part of the paper. You become so fixated on that little piece of the black circle when the majority is the white paper, but we ignore the majority because we're so focused on that one little thing in our life that could throw us off. You know, you have to take in the entirety of what you are perceiving to sort of draw the context from where to make a decision.
With that, actually, I wrote down that we might be need to retire the word failure. It's, I think we have so much negative associations with it, and I do agree to what you're saying because even I remember like when I went to uni, I would be so fixated on the failure that I wouldn't really do anything because everything was potentially a failure. And it was the same thing when, like, I was playing basketball and I got really good to the point where I was playing all game with no breaks. And it started with me doing my workouts at 5 a.m. I would wake up by myself, go outside, run, create my own programs, and I just didn't get tired because of those workouts. And I was playing really well, but I was so convinced that oh, I'm too slow, I'm too this, I'm too that. That I remember when I went to the national team tryouts, I literally was like, I didn't even try because I was like, there's no point trying. I'm not getting in anyways. Like I was so convinced of it, even though looking back, there was no reason based on my skill set to actually believe that because I was one of the best players in Latvia, and uh, and that's for me, a lot of it was if there's any chance that I could fail or lose, I'm not going to do it. I
Yeah.
only gonna do something that I'm certain, okay, I'm getting in, I'm accomplishing this or I'm doing that. But then when I think back on it, I would miss out on so many opportunities for growth and even like collaborations, so many different things that could have happened just because I was so over fixated on I can't fail. I can't, you know.
Yeah. And I always teach that there are three things that we must do in order to fail. The first one is we must make failure an option and we must give ourselves permission to fail. So that's the first one. If failure isn't an option, you of course aren't ever going to fail. And if you don't give yourself permission to fail, you'll never take that option. Because the moment that we say, oh, well, if this doesn't work out, then I'll just fail and I'll go do something else, right? We all do that. But as soon as we make that option, that's the option we're likely to take, right? When stuff gets hard, and it's going to get hard, then, oh, okay, so now I failed because it got hard and I don't want to work that hard anymore. Number two is you must make a conscious decision to not learn.
Mm.
This is important because learning is a human instinct. Babies in the womb are learning. They're learning sounds and songs and voices, right? And nobody ever taught them how to do that. This is human nature. And so, in order to fail, we must make a conscious decision to not learn. And thirdly, in order to fail, you must reduce your mindset to perceive falls as failures.
Mm.
We're all going to fall, right? We're all going to stumble. There are times when we'll all be crawling, but as long as you're crawling towards your goal, it's not a failure. It's just a fall, right? But as soon as you call it a failure, as soon as your mind says, oh, I failed because I've given myself permission to fail, so now I can fail, I'm not going to learn anything from that. That was a stupid thing I should have done. I did, whatever, those are the only, you need to accomplish all three of those things to fail. So if you do accomplish all three of those things, that means you have made a conscious decision to fail.
Mm. Conscious. So, does it mean that failure is not unconscious? It's always conscious?
Well, no, that's not true. I
Okay.
mean, we make a conscious decision to fail, but at the same time, subconsciously, we start going through patterns and routines that our
Uh,
nervous system is used to, right? So if we are used to taking the easy road out, we're going to take the easy road out. We must make a conscious decision to not fail. But if we don't do that, we've also consciously decided to fail, but based on our subconscious sort of urgings, if that made any sense.
yeah, yeah, yeah. On the easy road out, it's something that I think it's very typical. I think in my generation and younger, we have become quite soft and can't blame us because we have environment where you get everything instantly as well. Plus, you add comparison with everybody online with social media, so it adds
Right.
perfect combination for sometimes disaster. But with that, what can, or even like with your experience, what has been your relationship with the failure or doing hard things? Because a lot of times when it comes to building something meaningful, whether it's the business career or relationships, it's not easy, it's not straight line, it's not perfect. What would be your advice to especially younger generation when it comes to hard things and also failure, because it is in some ways inevitable?
Yeah. And you are exactly correct because you're growing up in a different society than what we grew up in. And to compare yourselves to others is almost impossible just because of what you're surrounded with, right? It takes a lot of work to not be that comparative. I was asked once, why do people quit in their personal growth? In other words, they're doing the workshops. They're starting to incorporate these things into their lives, which is where wisdom comes in, right? So they're incorporating the new things into their lives. They're reading the books. They're listening to the people. They're learning the stuff. But eventually they stop and they quit doing the work. Why do people do that? And my response is people quit when it gets hard.
Mm.
Now, it could get hard for a lot of reasons. Think of, you were an athlete. I was an athlete. I was a minor league baseball player.
Oh, nice.
So I understand where you're coming from. So think of, you're doing a workout, you're doing bench presses, and the first 7 reps, those are easy, right? But that's not where the growth is. The growth is in rep 8, 9, and 10, right? The growth is in sets 2 and 3, not the first set. The first set's easy. So nobody ever grew from an easy day. The problem with people when they're trying to become better in their lives, become a better version of themselves, is they get to a point that they start to uncover things that are hard to deal with. They start to maybe uncover a part of themselves that they don't want to have to deal with, or a truth that they don't want to have to face. And so it's so much easier just to turn around and go the other way. When you were doing your workouts at 5 o'clock in the morning, it would have been so much easier just to sleep till 7, right? But that's not where growth lives. Growth lives in the 5 to 7 when nobody else is working out. It also grows after the practice. See, the practice reps aren't the growth reps. That's just the learning reps. The growth reps happen after practice when you stay for core work, when you stay for technique work, when you go through those repetitions that nobody else wants to go through. That's what made you a great player. And so that's the same with anybody in their life, right? It's when you're doing something that is hard, that nobody wants to do, you have to wade that stream. And I always tell my clients, I know this stream is hard. I've been through this stream. I still go through the stream every once in a while because of things I'm going through. I'll never make you walk the stream alone. Your coach has never made you do your workout alone. Even though you worked out alone, they were always checking in on you, probably, right?
No.
Same is true with us.
For me, it was more so like a lot of it was driven by fear and shame. So I was just doing it. Nobody really knew it. But when it comes to actual practice, then yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And so that's the same as for us as we grow as people, right? You have to do the work when nobody is there with you. And I always tell, like I said, I was telling my clients, like, you're not going to have to do this alone. I'm going to wade this stream with you. I mean, I'm not going to do the work for you because that's not going to help you at all. You're going to do the work and it's going to suck sometimes, but we're going to make it through. You just can't stop.
with I
With
think
that,
that
there's a
the
lot of thought.
yeah with the hard that's the I think that's the challenge because I think we and like for me a good example would be like this year I have chosen my word for the year breakthrough. And a lot of times when I say it to people, they're like, "Oh, this is so cool and exciting," and I'm like, "Yeah, but I know that before breakthrough, you have breakdown. You, there's like certain things that you need to go through before you have the breakthrough, and and it's something that I think even our relationship with hard, it's something that I have gone through where even like with knowing if you're doing the right thing for yourself. Oh, it should feel easy or it should feel effortless. When it comes to growth, one thing that I have learned is when you actually are growing, it doesn't feel good. It you're stretched, you're uncomfortable, you face uncertainty, you face things you can't predict and new environments, new setups, new people, it's not easy. It doesn't feel good. And sometimes it's not just one day. It can be years, if not decades, of going through that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times what we can end up doing is we come to conclusion that, oh, because I feel bad, this must mean that this is not for me.
Right.
What did you say to somebody who's in that situation having that thought?
Well, and sometimes that's true though. So we have to
Yeah.
be very aware is that, I always tell the story about, and there's an animal biologist named Robert Sapolsky. Now, Robert Sapolsky studied zebras and their behavior. And he discovered as a biologist that studying zebras are supposed to be camouflaged, but we can see a zebra miles away. They're like they stick out like a sore thumb, right? but they're not camouflaged against their background. They're camouflaged against each other. And that's why the
Uh,
lions don't eat them, because the lion sees this giant mass moving across the savannah instead of a single zebra that it can eat. Well, the biologists discovered the same thing. And so they went out and they started painting red paint on the hindquarters of the zebra so they could tell what zebra they were studying. Well, guess what happened to the zebras with the red paint on them? The lions ate them because they stuck out from the herd now. But the same is true from people. And people tend to be more comfortable within their herd, not sticking their head out, not doing the extra, not taking the hard path, not doing all of this. And so my question that people come back to me is that, yeah, but I don't want to be part of the herd. I don't want to, just follow everybody else around. I want to do my own thing. So what does that look like? And my response is this: perhaps you're not in the right herd.
hmm.
Right. So if we're in the wrong herd, we can stick our head out because that's who we are. That's the work that we're doing. We're taking the hard path. And yes, we might lose our head. Yes, the lions might eat us, but that just means we haven't found our tribe yet. So my advice for people is make sure that you're in the right tribe first. You have the right support around you to help you through this stuff. And as athletes, when we were doing the works outside of things, it was the coaches maybe weren't there. We were driven intrinsically, internally for doing what we did. But at the same time, we had the right people around us who noticed, recognized, and helped us become better people overall, right? So, but if we'd have stayed in the level below, right? We'd have been great players in the level below, but then that wouldn't even been a challenge. I mean, why would I even do that, right? So as people too, make sure that you're within your right tribe and they will support you.
Okay, so with the right tribe, very important topic. Can you talk on? There's like one entrepreneur that called it the no man's land, where you have outgrown your current the group of people, and they're not necessarily aligned with you anymore. In some ways, they might even try to like bring you down a bit or get you back to their level, but you haven't found the next group yet. So you're kind of somewhere in the middle, and a lot of times it might feel more tempting to go back to the old group to avoid being by yourself.
Yeah.
How to navigate that like no man's land period of life?
Yeah. Okay. So our nervous system is a crazy system and it will always go back to what's familiar. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's comfortable. It doesn't mean it's good, but it's familiar. And we want to go to what is quote unquote home for us. And emotionally, I call that toxic relationship syndrome. And I sort of titled it that after what is literally a toxic relationship syndrome, because we all know people who have been in toxic relationships, whether they're abusive or emotionally toxic or whatever the case may be, but they keep going back to that relationship. Why? Because that feels like home. It's familiar to their nervous system. It's not a good place to be, but they're familiar with that. And so that's why they keep going back to that. Emotionally speaking, people will continue to go back to the emotions that they struggle with because that feels like home. I have had people fight harder to keep their depression than they did to try to get rid of it. Why? Because living without depression was just scary for them because they've never experienced that before. And I don't know what life is going to be like, but I know what life is like with depression. So I'm just going to stay there. So as we grow, yes, we get to that point where we're in kind of no man's land. Like we've outgrown our old tribe, but part of us wants to keep going back to that old tribe because that's what's familiar. That's home for us. But at the same time, if we keep going down this path, even when we go by ourselves, eventually new people are going to start coming into our lives because our energy is going to start attracting these new people. As long as we stay true to the path that we're on and keep trudging down that, you're going to build a new tribe. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have part of your old tribe try to follow you, because that means they are subconsciously trying to grow as well, and they're not sure how to do that. So it's okay to be a leader in that, but find your path and just don't stop. Just keep going.
With it's something that I have found interesting with also with people getting used to you advancing or being certain way. Like good example I have is with my half marathons. So like a few years ago I started to do half marathons, which at some point I believed I can't do. I was convinced I can't do long distances. That's why for years I didn't even consider half Ironman, nothing like that. Ironman I haven't done yet, but I have done half. And and then when as I was about to do my first half marathon, I said to my friend that if I finish this, then half Ironman is a possibility because that was the only reason why I couldn't do it. And this whole time in the background, I have my parents being like, be careful, this is not a healthy sport and this is long distances. And I also wasn't I wasn't super lean or anything. I was like chubby. So that also adds to that when you do long distances. And the whole time they would be like, "Do you have to do it? Isn't one race enough?" Like, eh. And then after I think I don't know if it was fourth. I think it was fourth half marathon or maybe half Ironman. I remember I put it in the like I usually put like picture with medal and things like that in the family chat. And I remember my mom wrote, congratulations, well done. What's next? And I'm like, complete shift in perspective compared to those, like, it wasn't even 2 years ago, less than maybe like 1.5 years. But one thing that I understood from that is that sometimes it takes time for people to adjust their perspective or perception of you and what you're doing and kind of also accept it that okay, I guess you're not stopping this thing even if we want you to stop. They kind of like accept it over time, and I have seen that like with it several instances. And I think a lot of times we have this naturally this expectation that people in especially close people will support us. But there's another thing that I heard Andy Purcell was talking about it, where he said that we expect people to support us, but a lot of times maybe they supported you at the first two or three attempts, but you kept like giving up or failing or going back to your old ways. So at some point, you actually have to get to where you give them reasons to support you.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's kind of like navigating that as well. But it's for me, it has been really interesting how also with people that I would meet less, I see how because I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm developing. If I meet somebody every 6 months, they are talking to the old version of me,
yeah,
those 6 months ago. They haven't updated their perception of me and who I am because we just haven't been in touch as much. And now I literally can hear how they're talking to that version of me with
yeah.
things that they're saying. And I'm like, I see what you're saying, but I'm not there anymore.
Yes. That's very true. You're talking to the me that doesn't exist anymore. And every day we become slightly different than we were the day before. And so when you talk to somebody 6 months at a time, it takes a while to catch up and sort of understand where you're at. A friend of mine posted this morning, what would your high school self say to your current self? It,
Mm,
man, the worlds apart that I am from my high school self. And I have, friends from high school who are my social media friends, but, we're not close like we were then. And so the person they know is the person then, just like you just described. Yeah. And so when they talk to me, it's like, no, that guy, I'm not that guy.
So with change, I think I also would want to touch on what it actually or like transformation, what it actually takes to get transformation that is lasting. Because I think a lot of times we I know that I have had it a lot where I would start something and then I fall back into the old. I start back into the old, start back into the old. And those chunks of time when I do it gets longer and when I'm off gets shorter. But I see a lot of this. You start, you don't change rapidly, instantly, within a month or whatever might be the timeline that we have set on ourselves. And then we go back to old ways of, okay, I guess I can't change. That's just the way I am. And and on top of that, add to that resistance we have towards change with wanting that certainty and what we're familiar with. What does it take to actually change?
Uh, there's a couple of things. I actually do a workshop on how to make positive changes permanent.
Okay.
And so I'm just going to give you a really high level of a couple of the tips. And the big one is know what season you're in.
Mm,
And how this works is we all experience a spring in our lives. Now, spring is the time for incorporating something new into our lives, like a new workout routine, a new eating habits, new house, new job, new something new in our lives, right? That's the planting the seed. Summer is a beautiful time because the stuff that we planted is starting to grow. It's starting to come. We're seeing the seedlings, come up. But at the same time, there are weeds who are trying to encroach on the new stuff that's growing. And these are the people in our life, who are trying to hold us back. And so we need to weed out those things in our life from the stuff that we planted so that it can prosper. Now we get to fall. Now, fall is the time of harvest. This is the time to celebrate, the growth and the accomplishments that you've had. That doesn't mean we're done by any means, but it means we need to celebrate the things that have been happening, right? The time of winter, this is my favorite season. And I kind of don't know why, but winter is the time of death.
mm,
And where I'm from in Wisconsin, USA, in wintertime, everything dies. Like the trees are dead, the grass is dead, all the plants are dead. And so, even though everything has died, either literally or figuratively, it could be a figurative death as well. When you go outside and you breathe in that cold, crisp air, there's something really refreshing and renewing about breathing in that beautiful cold air. So winter is not just a time of dying and death, but it's also a time where a slate is being wiped clean in our life, making room for new growth in spring. Now, our seasons might last 2 weeks, they might last 2 years. We might jump from season to season to season. So you might have planted something new in your life. Everything is going well. You've weeded out the stuff. You're watching the beautiful growth, but then you experience a death in your life. And now we have to deal with that. So now we've just skipped fall. Now we have to go deal with winter. So now we have to deal with winter. And once that's dealt with, now we can get back to the spring, summer, fall, and back into the sequence. Knowing what season you are in your life is imperative to knowing how to deal with the things coming into your life. This is the reason why most people fail at New Year's resolutions, right? They're not at spring. They're dealing with
mm.
other things in their life. I once had a client who came to me because she wanted to begin a new career, wanted to start her own coaching business. And we started working with that. But in the first meeting, I found out that she's not ready to start this because she's going through this horrible divorce, ugly, ugly, ugly divorce. So even though she wanted to be ready for spring, wanted to be, something new in her life, and she should after going through something like that, but at the same time, she wasn't done processing winter. So we had to go back and process winter. Once we were got through that, then we can move to spring, summer, fall. And right now she is doing her residency in clinical psychology. So she has gone through all of those seasons, but she had to take that step back in order to realize that. The second thing is that you must make changes when changes need to be made. What I mean by this is if you want to change something in your life, you must change it during the action. You can't declare you're going to stop smoking when you're not smoking. If you want to declare to stop smoking, do it as soon as you light up the cigarette, put it back out, throw it away. Now you're done. That carries a different weight. You can't discipline a child for doing something they did 2 days ago. It just doesn't register, right? You can't. I always use the analogy of a dog. You take a dog out, a puppy, and you let him go on the leash, but you call him to come back, come back, come back, and the dog doesn't come back. So you have to go get him. Now the dog is coming back. You can't discipline him now because now the dog is responding to your voice. And if you discipline him when he's responding to your voice versus when he's not responding to your voice, you're going to get a different reaction from him. The same is true for us. So anytime you want to break a pattern in your life, you must break it during the pattern. Sometimes I have clients with depression and they'll say, I can't meet today because, the depression hit hard and, I'm still in bed. I'm crying. I have my hoodie on. I can't talk with you today. And I call back and I say, this is exactly when I need to talk with you, right? This is when we need to do this, not when you're having a good day. We need to do this now. And so that's the big thing. And the third thing is that you must be consistent with your actions and you must take action now. If I'm on a call with a client like I am with you now, and I say, okay, I need you to do this in your life, and they'll say, okay, I'll do that as soon as I hang up the call, they're not going to do it. So this is when I say to them, okay, you need to make this phone call to your son because you need to rectify something. And they'll say, okay, I'll do it after the call. I said, no, go get your phone right now. Right now, you're going to make the call. I'll even mute so I don't have to hear the call, but you're going to do it right now. And so I make people do that. And that's, again, turning the knowledge into wisdom. Knowing something is one thing, but incorporating into your life is something completely different, right?
I think it's one of the things that took me. So, like, I got into self development quite early. I usually say I was young enough, aware enough, early enough to get into it. Um, and a lot of it, what led me to psychology, I think, like most people, is like trying to fix yourself and what is wrong with me. And but one thing that I did realize is that I would say like first 7 years of doing that, it was a lot of just consuming and knowing, but not doing,
Yeah.
not acting on what I knew. And that's partly what I'm trying to do with this podcast, is to bring on people that can help to bridge that gap, because that's where the biggest shift have been for me in my life, when I actually learned that, oh, knowing is good, it's helpful, but that's not where the real change is gonna happen. And only even like recently, a few weeks ago, I watched this short clip with Joe Dispenza where he said that in the work that they're doing, they actually don't do much work with the past, because one thing that I have realized through all the research is that having an insight doesn't lead to behavior change.
Right.
And because a lot of times what I would have for those like years is I have an insight and I'm like, oh, I'm doing this because of this. And I'm like mapping everything out. But did it change anything in my behavior or what I would do or decisions I would make and actions I would take? Not really. It was still the same. And that's where for me, it's really fascinating how we know what we need to do a lot of the times. If we don't, we have so many resources nowadays that we can literally find for free what we need to do. But when it comes to the actual doing, one is we struggle to start, but then the next challenge is to be consistent with it and to actually keep doing it, especially when we are at that season when you're just planting the seeds. And there was like, I had one guest on the other podcast that I'm doing where he explained it so nicely about the rain, that when we're planting these seeds, you don't see them, but with the rain is the same thing. You see when the rain is raining, you don't see it when it's going up,
Yeah.
but you know it's happening.
Yeah.
And it's the same with what we're doing with planting those seeds, is that trusting that it actually is going to manifest into something. But I think we get so stuck on, oh, I'm not there yet, I don't see it right now in front of me, that can get in a way of continuing to do it. Well, do you have any advice when it comes to being, well, one is to start to take action, which I think you did touch on partly, but it's something that I think is really valuable to emphasize because that's where a lot of things start, and then how to stay consistent after you have started.
Okay, so a couple of things. We always say that a personal growth is not about us. It's about everybody else around us. And well, I mean, let's be honest, it is about us. I want to be a better person than I was yesterday. But at the same time, my wife needs me to be a better husband than I was yesterday. And I'm a pretty good husband, but just a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Just a little bit. My kids, I've got 4 kids. They're all grown and gone. They have lives of their own now. They need me to be a better dad. And I'm a pretty good dad, but they need me to be a better dad, just a little bit. My friends need me to be a better friend, just a little bit. You know, my strangers that I encounter need me to be a better, more loving, humanistic kind of a person, just a little bit. And so it's not about making seismic shifts in our life. It's about making enough shift that we can be 1%. I always talk about the 1% per day. Man, if we can be 1% better each day, who wouldn't want to be 365 times the person we are in a year? So it doesn't take this just monster motion in our life, right? It's just those little tiny things that over time will begin to create dividends for us. How to start the action? What stops a lot of people from creating action is overthinking.
Mm.
And there, I have two techniques, I guess, to beat overthinking. Now, overthinking really is just the space that happens between the decision and the action.
Ah,
And
yeah.
that's really all that it is. We try to analyze and overanalyze what overthinking is. It's not that big of a deal, really. It's just we make the decision and then we pause and then we wait to make the action. So that's all that is. All we're going to do is shorten up that time. So the first one I call the name game. And what this is once you make a decision to do something, start to spell your name. And before you are done spelling your name, take the first step. That doesn't mean you have to complete the action, but take the first step towards it. And if you can take the first step towards it, you're more likely to continue and finish the action. So, for example, um, when I was a younger man and I was out and there was a pretty lady across the room, you know, I should talk to her. No, she wouldn't be interested in me, right? You know, we all go through that. You've done that with guys and, you know, it works both ways. And so, no, no. So we end up passing on an opportunity, right? You never know what's going to happen. But how this works is I should talk to that girl. And then you start to spell your name. K-E-L. And then I start walking towards her. And if I start walking towards her, chances are pretty good I'm going to say hello or something, right? Um, so that's kind of what the name game looks like. And you can use that in all kinds of different areas of your life. The second thing that I teach people is called the big butt or the double butt. And how this works is a lot of times people will say, I need to go work out. I need to go to the gym because, you know, I need to maintain my health and it would be good for me. And I always feel better afterwards. But I'm too tired. Like it's a long day. I'd rather just rest. I'd like to relax a little bit, right? I owe that
I
to them.
deserve it.
Now, when we do that, what are we most likely to do? Sit on the couch eating cupcakes or whatever, watching TV. We're not going to go work out. So the double butt is to add a second butt and then repeat the first thing you say. So it looks like this. I need to go work out because it's good for my health. And I really feel better after I work out. It's good for me, but I'm tired. It was a long day. I need to relax. I owe it to myself. But I know I need to go work out because it would be good for my health. And I feel it would feel better afterwards because our brain is going to respond to the last thing we experience, right? So if we give it what we want at the last, we're more likely to do that.
One question I have um, before we're slowly getting into closing up. With your 30 years of experience in coaching, what are some of the things that you have found that are timeless, that don't change over, haven't changed over time, some truths or some facts or realizations?
Um, one of one truth that a lot of people don't like to hear is that everything is a choice.
Mm.
Where you are right now in your life, and for all your listeners, is your choice. If you don't like your financial situation, it's because it's your choice. If you don't like your relationships, that's on you. If you don't like your job, that's on you. People with depression, that was also your choice. People with anxiety, that's also a choice you make. Now, with that, I always have to add that nobody ever woke up in the morning and said, I think I'll be depressed today.
Yeah.
But subconsciously, we start going through the same pattern, the same actions, to talk to the same people, watch the same things, read the same things, scroll social media all day, which leads us into that pattern of depression. So it is a choice to go through those same patterns in our life to get to where we're at. The good news of all of this is that since it is a choice, we can also choose to not be there. And the big thing about that is to create ownership, take ownership of where you're at. Wherever you're at in your life, own it. Like every decision that I've ever made in my life, as strange as this sounds, even as a teenager, has led me to this exact moment. I mean, not generally in my life. I mean, like literally sitting in this chair talking with you from across the world, having this conversation. Every choice I've ever made has led me to here. And the same is true for you. And the same is true for all your listeners. Every decision you've ever made led you to right now sitting in your chair with your earbuds in, listening to this cast. If you can own it, you can control it. And if you can control it, you can change it. That's the beautiful thing about it. And so getting people to change or knowing how to make those changes is really, really fun for me.
Before I ask you the last question, where can people learn about you, connect with you?
Um, the easiest way is through our website, projectfindyourfire.com. You can also find us on social media. You can find me individually, Kelly Meyer, or the business Project Find Your Fire. From those three spots, you'll have access to all of the other socials, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, etc. A couple of those I am just getting started on due to the probing of my own coach. So I finally decided to take the jump. So there's not a lot on LinkedIn and TikTok, but I'm working on it. I'm getting there.
All right. And last question is, what is one piece of wisdom you're still learning to live?
Um, the last piece of wisdom that I'm still learning to live is probably to trust the process. And that's one of the things I teach my clients too. Like you have to trust the process. I got you. We can do this. And for me too, that's also a real reality, right? Like some days, some days I don't
Yeah.
want.
Coaches are not immune to being human.
No, and I always tell people that, we do workshops and I give people a workbook. And I say, you have to understand that we still do the same exercises that you're doing because I'm a different person than I was then. But yes, for us, for me, to trust the process and to do the work and to know that it's going to be what I make it to be.
I love it. Well, Kelly, thank you for coming on, sharing your wisdom with us today. And to all the listeners, if you're somebody who has 20 plus years of experience, you want to come on the podcast, share your wisdom, there'll be details on that in the show notes. And if you want to start your podcast, need help with managing your podcast, or want to get on more podcasts yourself, there's also going to be information down below. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you in the next episode.